On February 27, 2024, the federal government launched the Expatriate Employment Levy, also called EEL Handbook. Now, the levy is the government-mandated contribution imposed on employers who employ expatriate workers in Nigeria. The EEL seeks to balance economic growth, social equity, and workforce development. In addition, the levy will ensure the equilibrium of expatriate employment with the protection of Nigeria's local labor markets and resources. At the launch, President Bola Tinubu had emphasized that the scheme should not be used to impede foreign direct investment (FDI. Though a similar levy is imposed in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Malaysia, as expected, there have been reactions from interested stakeholders on the introduction of the EEL, ranging from legal perspective, appropriateness of the timing, likely fallout, responses from foreign investors, and impacts on government revenues. However, the federal government has now suspended the EEL following concerns raised by stakeholders. Director, Press and Public Relations on the Ministry of Interior, Ozoya Imohimi, had announced this in a statement on Friday night. He said the Minister of Interior, Dr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, had met with a delegation led by the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Doris Uzoka-Anite, to address concerns and seek clarification on the recently launched Expatriate Employment Levy guidelines. This morning, Professor Obiodun Adeni of Base University joins me live on the program to find insights and perspectives in this conversation. Prof, it's always a delight to have you join us on this program. As it turns out, it's exactly 10 days since you and I talked about the EEL, and today a lot has changed fundamentally with regards to the suspension. What do we say to people who now tell us that, look, this is just one of those policy gone wrong moments of the federal government? Is that what it is?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just, unfortunately, and with greatest respect, a poverty of understanding. Because if you look at it, both in the short, medium, and long-term run, it's for the benefit of this country. All we need to do is to have the courage, the political will, and the tolerance to appreciate policies that can be reforming. You know, perhaps what naysayers or those who are critical of the policy need is understanding, and sometimes they limit the benefit of the policy only to levy, thinking that it's just about income generation. I think it goes beyond that.
Isn't that what it is?
No. There's also the security question. You know, and of course, as a sovereign nation, we need to be protective of our security. And when we're talking about security, we're not just talking about physical security in terms of protection of our borders through the instrumentality of our internal defense force represented in the police and external defense force essentially represented in the army, but also we also need, you know, policy security. Policy security in the sense of monitoring those who come into this country illegally, those who have been reported in the media severally as mining and mineral resources illegally. And of course, instances have been cited in Zambisa Forest, in Oyo, for instance, in Niger State, and several other places. How do these people come in if regulations were properly implemented? Now we're talking about a policy that will enable the immigration services to be able to capture data properly, identify those who are coming in, you know, and those who have come in illegally will be spotted out, you know, through the instrumentality of a levy, you know. And if you look at it from that perspective, you will see that it goes beyond just the income generation angle. Then what about, you know, the protection of local labor? You know, local labor has suffered in many years, you know, because occupations, professions that would have been otherwise done by locals, you know, as those sectors are populated by foreigners only in the guise of expatriates. And this is not good for us, especially in the period of youth bulge, where we have youth restiveness, increasing youth of population, consistent with a demographic that says that, you know, we have more youths in our population, much more than the old and the young. You know, so this policy, that's why I said these policies have both short, medium, and long-term effect. In the short term, you'll be talking about money, but money is not necessarily everything, especially in governance, you know, because you may have money and you do not have peace, you do not have order, you do not have regulations, you know, and ability to predict processes and procedures, you know. But if you have money laced with security, your mind will be better at rest.
It's just a matter of days, interestingly, Prof, between when the president signed off on it and when the suspension was announced. Talk to us about how much of pressure must have been put on the federal government, led by President Tinubu, to have taken this very drastic decision.
Yeah. I think that when people who are objecting to a program are very loud, and when you imagine that if we do not attend to them, it can be disruptive, or when you simply want to be respectful of their opinion, you can bend over backwards to listen to them. But in listening to them does not mean you should jettison your policy that will be beneficial to the system at the end of the day. That's what I think the government is trying to do, because it would be a disservice to us if we jettison the policy, considering how we have seen it in many other parts of the world. And we have cited several examples. Nearly 60 countries in the world operate this system. And it relates to immigration policy. Several countries, even the United States, developed countries, UK, United Kingdom, that we cite every day, often regulate their immigration policy. The different laws, different rules have been imposed, have been enacted every day to regulate immigration policy, because you need to control your borders and the content of your population. If you do not control it, there's going to be a problem for you at the end of the day, or you just have your country taken over. Look at the United Arab Emirates, for instance. What is the population of natives, indigenes in the UAE? Probably Dubai specifically. You'll probably be talking about 30%. But 70% comprises of foreigners. People who have come in with different skills, but they are able to continue their processes. They are able to bring about development through that process, only because of regulations. And they are very strict. And there are multiple regulations. If you stay in Dubai for more than 2 weeks, or for more than 1 month, for instance, you know that trouble is around you. And of course, in the UK, if you overstay your visa, you know that there's trouble for you in the short or in the long run. The United States too. Sometimes the trouble that awaits you in the future may be lifelong trouble, because there's data to capture you. Now we are saying that we have a country where people come in, without regulations. Yes, you may say there's regulation, there's a Local Content Act, there's an Immigration Act, but to what extent have we been able to implement these ones very well? And of course, the fact that we've not been able to implement previous policy well is not, does not mean we shouldn't think of new policies, that will probably enhance the previous ones. That's how governance is run, and that's how states develop.
Incidentally, the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, that is NASIMA, seems to be particularly excited about this announcement of suspension. You want to walk us through the reason behind it?
No, I've seen so many of their arguments, but I've not been convinced enough as a person, really. I've not seen any of their arguments that is strong enough, to counter the motive, the philosophy behind this government policy on expatriate employment levy. And what is it saying? It's simply saying that beyond the CPAC that you pay, which is $2,000, pay more, pay another levy, to be able to stay in this country
and work.
And work. And what it's saying is that, what you are paying is a way of government benefiting from your offshore earnings. But now the government only tax your allowance, through the personal income tax, which can even be evaded in the first instance because most expatriates move from state to state. And personal income tax goes to only state governments, The federal government gets nothing. But government is moving, to tax your offshore earnings, because expatriates are mainly paid in foreign currency, and the money goes straight into their foreign accounts, not locally. And government gets nothing, whereas the resources, the job is done here, and government gets nothing. So that's what the government is simply saying, and there's nothing illegitimate about this, because we've seen it happening, like I've said several times, in other parts of the world. I want to believe that if these bodies that are objecting to the policy come to proper understanding, they will key into it. What I also believe that some of them are just concerned about is that they were not informed prior, which is not a precondition for government regulation anyway. Prior information is not a precondition, But again, government might just want to be respectful and take them in, give them an understanding so that there can be progress on this policy.
I've spoken with people off the record, Prof, who say that the government, as is often the case, got off on the wrong foot with this one, because they say there should have been what they refer to as broad-based consultation prior to announcement.
Broad-based consultation, sometimes it's not all policies that should be broad-based. Because look, if that's why we talk about the Pareto rule. You know, if you spread decision oftentimes among 225 million people, you're not going to get anywhere. Sometimes leaders will have to act on behalf of the people, you know, imagining what is best for them. You know, because decisioning is very processual and can be laborious. It can continue ad infinitum forever, you know, and sometimes you just have to take the bull by the horn and lead the people, you know, explaining to them why you are taking this decision, not necessarily for self-aggrandizement or personal benefit, but for the generality of the populace. And of course, sometimes it's not, laws are very important. Sometimes it's not about black letter laws, but about administrative decision, executive decisions, you know. And after executive administrative decision, then you can seek legal instrument to back it up. In this instance, we are talking about a situation where the legislature was keyed in. They are aware. We have had several times the pronouncement of the chairman, Senate Committee on Interior, you know, Senator Adams Oshomole, telling us about how Nigeria is infiltrated by illegal labor, you know, how ex-prisoners come here to work. Which other country in the world will you see this happening? And what we're saying is that, yes, you can come to work, but pay some levy. You know, so that if you're obligated some more, then you think twice before you come to work. And of course, if you think that you still need to work after paying the levy, and you need to bring in people that will help you, you know, then you can look inwards, you know. There are many ways in which you can look inwards. And of course, if you are looking inwards, you are even making things cheaper for yourself, because it is cheaper to employ local labor than bringing in labor from outside, you know, real labor, you know, because bringing in labor from outside means that you'll be paying for accommodation, paying for transportation, paying for security of the person, paying for flight, you know, multiple payments that you otherwise avoid if the labor were local. You know, so I think it's just simple and straightforward, but we just need to be painstaking, you know, and understand with government. What we are doing in our own situation most of the time is that we doubt government, you know, maybe because of long years of deficit in trust between government and the governed, such that when government comes up with any policy, we just greet it, you know, with cynicism, you know, and we become curious and say, these people have come again, and government is forced to back down in a situation where they should actually go on.
You know, I'm just wondering now, I mean, a while ago you talked about how that we seem to be having a narrow perspective on this issue of the EEL, because all we are looking at for the most part is the levy element in it. Do you think if we remove that element, the conversation will be different?
Yeah, if we remove the levy element, conversation will be different. If you look at it from the angle of bolstering our security, right, you know, so that we will not have too many illegal migrant workers in this country, which, and you know, when you have illegal migrant workers in the country, there's no data capturing them, they are not accountable, they are not transparent, you know, they make their resources and export it, there's heavy repatriation, putting pressure on forex, you know, and they can also constitute security risk. In a situation where you don't have data on a particular person, it can be a danger to you, especially in this age of terrorism, you know, and collaboration with international terror networks. You know, no country wants that to happen. Then secondly, still beyond the levy, is the question of encouraging the use of local labor, you know. If we have many of the jobs taken over by so-called expatriates, by local workers, of course, we'll have gone a step further, reducing the number of unemployed in this country. Imagine the population of those working in the hospitality industry, in the supermarket industry, in the construction industry, in the oil and gas sector. Many of them so-called expatriates. You know, are you saying that we cannot tap local resources to do many of all these jobs? Sometimes we hear questions about trust. You know, Nigerian workers cannot be trusted. You know, they can form union. Come on, you know, these things are manageable. Why are they not manifesting in the banking sector, you know, that is 95% populated by Nigerians, you know? Why are we having efficiency in that area that is almost 95% local content? So it's just about management and focus. And some of these arguments you just find are not very plausible.
Some people say, well, construction, like you mentioned, for example, is particularly technical. So you're not going to essentially compare that with banking. Maybe that's a discussion we want to have another day. But for now, the federal government says it's suspension. So it's not something that has been, gotten rid of altogether. But how much of truth do we find in that? Because most times when you find this announcement of a particular initiative be suspended, and it just dies a natural death.
No, I don't think so, because here we're talking about a policy that has been discussed for 4 or 5 years. It didn't start with the Tinubu administration. It's been in the cards for 5 years, and it's been going through interagency collaboration, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Trade and Industry, or Trade and Commerce, as the case could be, Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, Ministry of Interior, Nigerian Immigration Services, over many years, and it has gone through a lot of meal. Now you are seeing it coming into fruition. This is a public-private partnership that will be administered at no cost to the government, but government will benefit. At no cost to government, mark that word, but government will benefit through the provision of technical services by the private sector. And I do not see anything wrong with this, because we have had many instances in the past where we have collaboration with foreign partners, even in the manning of very sensitive sectors in this economy. Do not forget that even our Sora was built by foreigners, and to a very great extent, foreigners still manage the place in terms of the structure and the maintenance, I mean, so in an age of globalization, where we are seeing synergy in processes, synergy in activities, you have less concern for expertise, for the location or the origin of expertise, especially when you have done your due process, And if we have seen it at different levels, what's the problem with us replicating it at this important level?
The President Tinubu government has been very strong in terms of attracting foreign direct investment. He has never hidden that, even before he came into office. One of the strands of the argument by Nasima is that upon implementation, the EEL will impede progress on that front. Is that your sentiment?
No, how can it impede progress? You want to do your business where you're sure you're going to get a return on investment, when you are sure there are regulations, when you are sure you're not going to be competing with quacks. Some of these expatriates that are talking, or some of these people that Nasima is talking for, are people who are not happy that their fields are being infiltrated by quacks who are preventing business for them. Quacks from abroad, from other countries, brought in as prisoners, brought in as manual unskilled laborers, brought in as skilled expatriate laborers. And they are competing with experts who otherwise know the job and who otherwise should
certified with competence.
Certified, So there are so many contradictions that we need to address our minds to. And so now we're saying that let's have a better regulation or more regulation that will limit, that will provide order and organization, systemization into the process, rather than having unbridled inflow, uncontrolled, haphazard system and arrangement, meant for every Tom, Dick and Harry, disguised as expatriates.
On the final note, Prof, while this suspension lasts, what is Nigeria losing?
We're losing time and we're losing resources, just because we probably don't have courage, or maybe we're being pretentious, or we simply want to be heard, or we just think that everything in government is negative. And of course, we have this country to build.
Right. I think that's a fine place to leave it. Thank you, Professor Denny, for coming to join us this morning.
My pleasure.
And that's what we're leaving it, but we will continue to follow the conversation around the EEL for you. I'm Uyag Mofugwe. Anthony Mamodu will bring you the rest of the program.